Hello and welcome to a Twynham debate. I'm Thomas Godfrey. The four men you're about to see on stage each want to become the next MP for Christchurch. To do that, more than ever, they need the votes of young people. Our audience is comprised of students from Twynham School and Twynham Sixth Form, some of which can vote and will be voting for the first time in 6 days' time from this being recorded. Some of them can't, but want to get an insight into their voting future. As per the rules, none of the candidates have seen, or their teams have seen the questions they are about to be asked. They are set questions. The debate is split into roughly 7 8-minute segments, and that will be followed by time for free debate. In the last 15 minutes of the debate, you'll have the time to ask questions to any of your candidates. Of course, if you are watching on YouTube, please do get involved. Click the I in the top right-hand corner and vote for who you think won the debate at the end. Our audience has agreed to remain silent throughout to ensure we have a full and fluent debate. There is no noise at all, except right now as we welcome our 4 candidates for the Christchurch constituency to the stage. Please welcome from the Conservatives Sir Christopher Chope, from Labour Andrew Dunn, from the Liberal Democrats Mike Cox, and from the Green Party Chris Rigby. Now, we have asked the candidates to prepare a 60-second opening statement, and that centres around the question, why should I get your vote? We start in a moment with Sir Christopher Chope.
Good afternoon, everybody. Some people think I'm a bit long in the tooth, and I can tell you that one of the things about which I've got greatest pride is that back in 1996, one of the first things I did was to ensure that we had a sixth form in Christchurch, and that was one of my main political achievements. And it's a great pleasure today to see, I think, the best part of 450 members of the Twynham sixth form here, which wouldn't have been here but for that change which we made, because prior to that, this school and the Grange and Highcliffe only had schooling up until before people went to the sixth form and they had to go to Brockenhurst or elsewhere. So it's great to see such a gathering here today. I'm in favour of getting Brexit done, and I'm also in favour of this country living within its means and ensuring that we get better quality public services for the future.
Thank you, Sir Christopher. Thank you. We're going to move on to Labour and Andrew Dunn.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. My name is Andrew Dunn, and I'm proud to be the Labour Party candidate. I have a business degree, and I served as a police detective, as well as running my own small business, and now work as a youth worker at Somerford Youth Club. So why should I get your vote? We have 4 million children living in poverty and rising, and more people than ever sleeping rough on the streets as temperatures plunge. While students leave university £50,000 in debt because of Tory and Lib Dem austerity policies.
My apologies, I think we are just having a sound issue very quickly. Frankie, can you pause the timer, please? Well, this is live, isn't it? That's what they say. The show must go on. I think we fixed it well enough. Andrew Dunn.
Okay. Students will leave university £50,000 in debt because of Tory and Lib Dem austerity policies. We have a Tory MP here who votes against measures to prevent climate change and blocks bills to protect young women from upskirting and female genital mutilation. Vote for me on December the 12th, and you'll be voting for an MP who works in and really understands our community and acts with the honesty and integrity that you should expect and deserve from your MP. You'll also be voting for a party who will put the environment and the people at the heart of everything it does, young and old alike, to make sure we live in a country that works for everybody, not just a few.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. We do need to rattle through these, get on to your questions you have so very kindly submitted. We're going to move now to the Green Party with Chris Rigby.
Thank you all for coming. This election is a really serious election. It is a one-time opportunity. This is the climate election. We have got until 2030 to make serious inroads towards beating climate change and limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees and not letting it accelerate beyond control. All of us are going to sit here and we're going to tell you we've got climate policies and environmental policies and this policy and that policy. What you need to do is consider who you can trust to put those policies in place and who can look after the planet for your future, because that's what it is, really. That's what we're talking about. When we look at our Green Party policies, there is only one Green Party, there is only one Green New Deal, and it comes from us. We are also putting in a sustainable economy bill to ensure that the economy functions with the environment, and a future generations bill, which requires decisions to consider the needs of the future as well. So consider voting for Green.
Thank you. And finally, the Liberal Democrats, represented by Mike Cox.
Thank you, and good afternoon. We're at a historic crossroads in our country. We can leave the EU, a move which would enrich the few and impoverish the many, or we could remain in the EU and gain an immediate boost to the UK economy, where we could rebuild the NHS, our schools and our public services. Since the referendum, we have moved from being Great Britain to Little Britain. The reality of Johnson's Get Brexit Done folly will be a decade of treaty renegotiations. No election promises are worth the paper they're written on if Brexit happens. But there is a more important issue than that, and that's climate change. This is a battle for the survival of our blue planet, and it's a battle we have to win. And unless we and the world act now, this very school could be underwater. Our choices here are clear, they're stark, and they're simple. We can stick with the same MP with the same right-wing policies that he's espoused so far, or you can choose a brighter future with myself, a local resident, a successful chartered accountant, a local councillor, a trustee and a treasurer to local charities. So let's be frank, no other result is possible in Christchurch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have to wrap you up there. We are now going to move to the section of debate which has your questions very much. These have been submitted by students from Twynham Sixth Form. We will give the candidates 1 minute each to respond to the question. In case any members of the audience are in any doubt what that question is, you can see it on the screen at the top. Coming up now, though, our first question will be asked by Luke Hewitt. Well, like I said, it's live, isn't it? This is one of those harsh realities. Never mind, we have the backup. I have the question I will ask you each. And we're going to start with Andrew Dunn when I've asked it. Should the national minimum wage be raised? If so, why and to what extent? Andrew, 1 minute.
Absolutely, the national minimum wage should be raised, and Labour will bring in a national minimum wage of £10 per hour. That won't just be for the older generations and for the over 21s. That will be from when people start work at 16, because we believe that if you do a fair day's work, you deserve to be paid a fair day's wage for it. And that money needs to go towards your housing costs, your bills, your food, your transport. All of these things mean that you should be paid fairly for the work that you do. And we will make sure that that happens.
Thank you, Andrew. Mike Cox from the Liberal Democrats.
Yes, I do believe it should be raised, and the reason it should be raised is that it's an absolute scandal that in this country you have working people that have to go to benefits and have to go to food banks, and that's just completely not acceptable. So the minimum wage does have to be increased, and probably increased considerably. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Ridley.
Thank you. Yeah, of course it needs to be raised. We would increase the living wage to £12 an hour. That would be the target, and not just that, that would be extended as well to 16 and 21-year-olds who actually have a minimum wage considerably less than what anyone over 21 would. It's not just about changing the minimum wage as well and saying what it is. We need to make sure that there's equality within society, so we've also put in and ensure that the maximum wage that anyone in a company earns is no more than 10 times the lowest paid worker in that company as well. So you get more fairness, more distribution of wealth throughout society.
Thank you. And now going to start to affect all of us. Christopher Chope.
The minimum wage under the Conservatives has been raised consistently, and that will continue to be our policy. Where we disagree with other political parties, however, is that we don't believe that you should be required as an employer to pay the same minimum wage to a 16-year-old as you pay to somebody who's 22 or 23, because the consequence of that will be that it would be much more difficult for the youngsters to get employment, because they won't be able to be paid less, recognising their lack of experience, and be an attraction to employers. So it will be the consequence which nobody would really want, and that is that they make it more difficult for young people to get into employment if we level the minimum wage for everybody from 16 up.
Thank you, Sir Christopher. Thank you. We're now going to go on to some follow-up questions. These follow-up questions have been written by me and not shared or screened with anyone. I'm going to start with Chris Rigby. You have pledged to end age-related wage discrimination, so all workers over 21, or if that's in your manifesto, I think you said 16, get to receive the same wage. So why would companies still hire young workers if there are potentially more experienced older workers who they can hire for the same price?
You're making an assumption that older workers are more experienced. We have people entering the job market at any age. If you choose to go to university, you'll be coming out at 21. So you could be going into your first job at 21 and demanding a higher wage than someone who's going into their first job at 17 or 18. And actually, there is no difference beyond what you have done for your education. Most minimum wage paid jobs tend to be jobs in the service industry. A lot of people get experience very quickly. You can have someone who's 18 who has had 2 years experience working. You can have someone who's 25 going in with no experience, still demanding a higher wage. There has to be equality.
Thank you. So Christopher, we've just heard Chris talk about equality. Why, in your view, should older workers be able, or at least legally able, to receive more than their younger compatriots?
Well, I covered this in my earlier remarks to an extent. But if somebody is in work and has additional needs beyond what they're able to afford from their income, then it's much better that the state should subsidise that person as an individual with, for example, tax credits, rather than impose upon an employer an unrealistic demand that that employer pays an unaffordable high wage.
Okay. Let's go to Andrew Dunn. You've proposed a £10 living wage, which would also then become the legal minimum wage. Would that impact people who choose to do apprenticeship straight out into a £10 wage in an apprenticeship when the current average wage is around £3.70?
I mean, absolutely, it would impact them. And I think we have to get away from this idea that it's only people over a certain age that have needs and have to pay for things in life. You all have to pay for the clothes on your back, your food, your transport, going out, trying to enjoy your lives as well when you're young people. And so just saying that this should be for over 21s or for over a certain type of job and not apply to everybody, including apprentices, in my view, is completely wrong.
Andrew, I'll stick with you. Do you think this could mean that less apprenticeships become available? Because obviously if you put the wage up, suddenly employers have to pay out, they'll shell out more, up to another sort of £6.30 an hour for their apprentices. Would that surely reduce the amount of apprenticeships on offer and therefore reduce the amount of our young people potentially leaving Twynham or leaving a GCSE post-16 and not having the ability to go into an apprenticeship because there are none available?
I don't see that as a problem at all. As part of Labour's manifesto, we're offering a green industrial revolution that will completely change our energy sector from relying on fossil fuels to solar power, wind and water. And with that, it's going to bring a massive change in how our economy runs and the type of businesses that we have. So we will be creating thousands, hundreds of thousands of new apprenticeships and 1 million more green jobs. And so those jobs will be out there, and the two are very different issues.
Thank you. Just one recommendation. So we think that the cure to the audio problems is you hold the microphones. So although the stands are pretty and they sort of stop you from having to hold up something for another hour or so, that may just be the cure to the constant interference I'm sure no one in our audience wants to continue hearing. We are going to move on now to our second question. We're going to go to Millie Gray, who has the second question. This is a 0% success rate so far on questions. But again, never fear, I have the question. It's an important one. I'm going to start with Chris Rigby in a moment. What will you and your party do to tackle poor student mental health?
What we need to start doing with regards to mental health, and we're saying poor student mental health, but this is poor mental health across the board and the help which is available. At the moment, mental health and physical health are not treated the same. And mental health and physical health need to be treated exactly the same because they both are joined and they both impact your school days, your working life, everyone's life as it is. So all of the mental health funding which we've got is included within the funding which we're going to be putting into the NHS as well. That's going to be increased by £6 billion a year and also putting a lot of healthcare staff back into the community and creating community hospitals and community care centres which are easily available and accessible to everyone.
Thank you. Sir Christopher Chope.
The most important thing is to ensure that young people have got access quickly to the community mental health services. I know of a number of constituents who have been waiting for many, many months before they can get that access. And that's bad for them, it's bad for their parents, it's bad for the school in which they are a pupil. And that's, I think, the most important thing, almost to give a guarantee that as soon as somebody is referred for treatment or for examination for mental health difficulties, that those people are able to access that advice and treatment very quickly.
Mike Cox.
The Liberal Democrats have put transforming mental health services at the heart of their manifesto. It's on the front of our manifesto. So that means that basically mental health services have to be treated the same as physical health services. And that's the most important, and that certainly will help deal with the crisis which is currently happening in our universities with young people and mental health. We're also about reforming the Health and Social Care Act, which has been recommended by the NHS for many years and is yet to happen, which should make the NHS more efficient and joined up in the way it works.
Thank you. Andrew Dunn for Labour.
In our manifesto, we make mental health a priority, especially for young people. We'll make sure that every secondary school has a mental health counsellor in it and every primary school has access to one. We are going to begin giving the NHS £26 billion worth of extra funding and ensure that everybody has access to the services they need. It's about looking after people, and I work in a youth club and I see the issues that young people face, and we need to make sure that the services are there, available for them and fully funded and properly staffed.
Thank you. So Christopher, I'll come to you first. You said you know of constituents not being able to get mental health services, yet in the first 7 years of the last Conservative government, which could after a general election still be a Conservative government, the amount of teenagers who needed mental health treatment, psychiatric treatment, rose to over 17,000, and yet your party cut mental health funding by £538 million. Why is that?
Well, I don't accept the figures you've quoted. I don't recognise those figures. But locally, there's no doubt about it that
It's not debatable that your party cut mental health funding.
well, that's may not be debatable. But what I'm saying is that locally, the mental health services went through a difficult period with the Dorset Healthcare Trust being put into special measures, and that had an adverse effect upon people in my constituency, and I know that as a fact, and I have been working very hard to try and improve that situation. Those are the local facts. I can't speak about what's happened nationally, and the figures that you quote I don't recognise.
Okay, well, I won't quote any figures in this question, but your manifesto, and this is a quote, actually talks about mental health patients having greater control over their own treatment. What does that mean? How will that look in practice?
It will depend on each case, won't it? It will depend on at the moment, there are people in my constituency who want to get access to mental health quickly, and that means giving them more control over whether they are going to be, when they're going to be able to get an appointment, the sort of access they want to have, and so on. That's what those words, I think, must mean.
Okay. We'll go to Labour. Your manifesto, you claimed you can recruit 3,500 qualified counsellors for every sixth form, every school in the country. How will you fund paying their wages? Will the school be expected to pay that, or will a Labour government?
No, the government is going to pay for that. Our manifesto is fully funded, and every single cost in it is in our grey book, which outlines where the money is coming from. The money will be given to schools, it will be given to local governments to fund these resources, because you deserve it. You're the future of this country, and it's you who need the opportunities to discover who you are and what you want to do with your lives, and that's the most important thing.
Thank you. Mike, your party, you've said you'll spend 2.4 billion on mental health. How's that going to be distributed around the country, and how will that look? What effects will that have?
Well, as I said, we're going to transform the, mental health services throughout the country. In terms of how it will be funded, we're actually putting a penny on income tax in order to fund better health services generally, and that's part of it. In terms of how it will be distributed, we will leave it to the medical professionals to decide how it's going to be distributed, but I would have thought it would be on the basis of need, who needs it most.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to our third question this time, and I'm hoping he's here. It comes from James Gray. Oh.
What will you and your party do to tackle
The local GP surgery, so the Grove surgery, any of a sort of local Christchurch surgery, has awful waiting times and awful customer service. How will this be fixed? Mike Cox.
Well, it'll be fixed by more money, to be honest. I mean, the health service desperately needs more money, and we've certainly committed to 35 billion up front by the fact that we're not going to leave the EU. But then we're also putting more money into it by increasing, as I just said before, put a penny on income tax to pay for a £7 billion investment in the NHS. So it will be done through extra resources, which basically means more money. And just a comment. Previously, the IFS have welcomed our budget manifesto because it's the only one that adds up. Neither the Conservatives or Labour does.
Thank you. Our audio system was on the ropes, and it has finally been knocked out. There's not a great deal we can do about it. It means that there is only one mic, and the radio mic is the only one that will work. My apologies to all the candidates and, of course, the audience who may at times struggle to have heard what the candidates may have said. We're going to go to Chris Rigby, if we can get the mic to you, Chris.
Thank you. So it's not a unique problem with the surgery in Christchurch. It's one which is happening all across the country, everywhere, and it's because of severe underfunding for the NHS. I saw a statistic that every GP has about 3,500 patients registered to them, which is completely unacceptable when people are waiting, needing healthcare. So what we're going to be doing is ensuring that there's enough staff to actually deliver the services which are needed by the population. That's going to be covered by different staff as well. Not everyone needs to see a doctor for every problem, so it's ensuring that there's the right number of nurses, the right number of doctors, the right number of support workers in there as well. And also getting rid of privatisation from the NHS, which is crippling it from the inside as well. So reforming the Health and Care Act and stopping private companies having involvement and making sure that the NHS locally is being run by the local authorities.
Sir Christopher Choke.
Well, each GP surgery is independently run by...
Sorry, we're trying to give you the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Each GP surgery is individually run by a group of doctors, and they must make their own decisions on priorities and so on. But the Grove surgery was recently relocated to Christchurch Hospital, and I know that in the course of that relocation there were teething problems. And I know also that there are other surgeries in the constituency where there have been such problems, but those problems have been positively resolved. And during this campaign I met people with a lot of praise for the work that their local surgeries and GPs are doing. So I don't think we should smear all GPs through one example. But what is important is that we should have more GPs, and that's why the Conservative government is promising that there will be a significant increase in the number of GPs so that the surgeries are properly manned.
think we go to Andrew Dunn now, who hasn't spoken yet. Yes.
Thank you. It's ironic, really, that Sir Chris has talked about adding more nurses into the NHS when it's his party that have taken them out of the NHS.
Andrew, just to clarify, I think Sir Christopher's talking about GPs.
And GPs as well. It's all part of the National Health Service. Labour will give £26 billion worth of extra funding to the National Health Service, and we will train more GPs and have more nurses and more staff across the service so that they're there when you need them. A lady I worked with the other day went to make an appointment at her local GP, and she has access to 3 of them, and it's 3 weeks wait for her to see her GP. She's got an issue that she needs to speak to someone about now, and she's having to wait weeks, which is affecting her mental health and is affecting her physical health as well. This is absolutely not right, and we will do something about it. We will put the funding there, we will train the GPs, and we will make sure that they're there when you need them.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, I'll stay with you. The last time Labour were in charge of the NHS, the 2013 report, so 3 years after you left office, found that during Labour's tenure, 13,000 patients had died needlessly. Your party had set up a care agency, and it was then later involved in covering up some of these deaths. Can we really trust you to solve this?
I think you can trust us to solve this issue and this crisis that we have now, one of the many crises that the Tory government has created. Labour created the NHS back in the 1940s, and we will be the party to save it. The Tories have tried to sell it off, they've privatised it, and if Brexit happens under their version of it, then Donald Trump will get his small little hands on it, and that is not what anybody wants at all. Labour absolutely will save the NHS, we will put the money into it, we will fund it, and it will be there for you at your time of need, as it should be.
Thank you. Sir Christopher, we've heard a lot about privatisation. We've heard a lot of things being flung around that Boris Johnson, if elected, will sell the NHS. He'll put it on the table to Donald Trump. Let's stay with the idea of privatisation. In 2018, last year, you put forward this private members' bill to encourage co-payment of NHS services. Why did you do that?
I did that because a number of constituents had come to me and said that they were waiting for a long time to get, for example, hip operations, and rather than wait for that length of time, they were saying, well, why won't you accept a contribution from me, that's the individual constituent, and so I can put that towards the costs of the NHS, and then there'll be a double benefit, because I will get my operation more quickly, but the NHS will also get a lower cost because I will be contributing. That's what co-payment is about, and in a sense that's what we already have in relation to NHS dentistry and eye care services.
Would you not accept then that if co-payment was to become a thing, this private members' bill that you're actually infamous for talking out in Parliament had, say, gone through into law, wouldn't that essentially mean that those who are affluent enough, rich enough to pay for these operations, to have them quicker, would get benefit over those who simply aren't? And that doesn't sound like a national health service. That sounds like a private health service where the rich get operations quickly and the poor are made to wait.
So, Tom, I don't think that's a very fair way of putting it. Surely those who can afford things should take responsibility for those things as far as possible themselves. And so if you are a millionaire, then why should you be dependent upon the health service funded by taxpayers? Why don't you go out there and get your own health care? That seems to be the sensible thing, because if the millionaires are not a burden on the health service, then it means the health service will be available for the people who need it.
Thank you, Chris. I saw you shaking your head there. Your thoughts?
Oh wait, fine. I'm kind of at a loss for words. When we have a national health service, and the way that you talk about that, and the fact what you said is, why should billionaires be a burden on the health service when we still have private healthcare where they can go to a separate place? They don't need to jump a queue in the NHS ahead of someone who is unable to afford it. We need to start thinking and looking at a fair society, a fair community, where everyone takes responsibility for their neighbours and takes responsibility for everyone around them. You can't have people thinking, well, what am I getting? What am I getting? What am I getting? You've got to think, what are we getting and how do we benefit as a society to get these things? So if people are going to start paying more to receive preferential treatment from government services, where does that leave us as a society?
Thank you. Chris, you very clearly don't trust the Conservative Party with the NHS. But your ward, you're a councillor for Winton East, your ward is home to, although it was recently refurbished, the worst health centre in Dorset, Alma Medical Centre, now Winton Medical Centre. Here are some of the reviews from Winton Medical Centre. Absolutely useless, wouldn't even give 1 star. Receptionists are rude, obstructive and generally unhelpful. No wonder they're the worst performing surgery in Dorset. This is a true waste of public resources. How can we trust you with healthcare in Christchurch, for the whole of Christchurch, when in your ward this service is this poor?
Because as the Green Party at the moment, we are not in charge of that surgery. That is being run by a group of doctors, as Chris Chope said.
So how are you standing up for those? How are you standing up for people who are affected by the poor level of healthcare? You are their councillor.
I am their councillor. When people come to me with problems, I address them. People haven't come to me directly and asked about that. If we were to, as I said earlier, take the NHS and put it back into the local authority, it'd give the local council a lot more power to be able to make changes within it. Until we actually have that, the local authority's powers to do anything is very, very minimal within the surgeries. So that is why we want to put community and the local authority back with the NHS working hand in hand.
Thank you. I'm going to have the radio mic now. I don't know if they are all working again. They should be working again.
No, they're not.
Oh, they're not? Okay, they're not. Okay, we're going to have this around. Thank you. Mike, I'm going to come to you. One of the effects of stopping Brexit, as your party so wants to do, would be the continuation of free movement around the European Union. But surely it would be the Conservatives' points-based immigration system. That means the NHS can get the most skilled doctors, the most skilled nurses and the most skilled consultants that people in this country really need.
Now, one of the criticisms about freedom of movement is that we're allowing all these people to come in. Don't forget, it's all your rights to freedom of movement across Europe that they're trying to curtail. That's the problem. They're curtailing your rights. It's not everybody else's rights. And yes, we had freedom of movement, and quite right too. At the moment, we're suffering. This country is suffering because people from the European Union are going back home. They're fed up with this hostile environment for immigration in this country. There are Polish people, Romanians, who are leaving the NHS. They're leaving the building sites to go back home, and that is meaning that this country is suffering because of that.
So in that case, if people are leaving, they are leaving their NHS jobs to return to their home countries in Europe. Surely we should then start accepting, on a points-based system, the most skilled consultants from elsewhere to come and help our patients who need it.
We should be accepting them from wherever they come. I haven't got a problem with immigration at all. If local people can't do the jobs, are not willing to do the jobs, then we should accept people to do the jobs at the right salary and at the right,
Would you accept the points-based system for NHS workers?
I would prefer to keep with the system we've got at the moment, but there's nothing wrong with the points-based system. It's perfectly legitimate. But there's no problem with actually having people from Europe being part of the European club, that we can actually accept those people because they've been doing a damn good job so far.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to question 4 from Lacey Pottle, who is here. Yes, you might want to stand up and sort of... You might want to sort of stand up and, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. How will your party support alternative energy sources to reduce the demand for fossil fuels?
Yeah, I think everyone catch that? How will your party support alternative energy sources to reduce demand for fossil fuels? We're going to start with Andrew Dunn.
Thank you for the question, Lacey. I think everyone's very clear, and I've mentioned it already, that Labour Party are going to bring about a green industrial revolution. We're going to completely revolutionise how we use energy in this country and how we think about tackling the climate emergency. Because as much as other parties will tell you this is the Brexit election, this isn't. This is the climate emergency election, and it's the most important issue of our time. So the Labour Party will transition away from fossil fuels to wind, solar and water power. We will also tax the fossil fuel companies so that they pay their fair share of the harm and damage they've done to our planet. We're going to build hundreds of thousands of new homes. They will all be properly insulated and properly using green technology. We're also going to insulate and retrofit insulation to everybody's home and install green technology so that everybody could benefit, including making buses all electric by 2030 and tackling every single aspect of the environmental emergency that we face, because it's time and we have to do
Thank
something
you, Andrew.
now.
I'm going to have to stop you there. You pass the mic to your left. The mic.
We're going to invest in renewable energy, and so that by the year 2030, it'll be 80% of our power. That's what the Liberal Democrats are going to do. We're going to invest in renewable energy, and we already have done. Ed Davey was the Minister for Climate Change, and he invested, when he was in charge, into wind power, offshore wind power, and we're now the world specialists in offshore wind power. And that's the opportunity that we have as part of the European Union to be the leader in alternative power. And we've already in offshore, we can become in inshore, and we also can in tidal power. We need to invest in these and become so that we can change our whole focus so that at least 80% of our power comes from renewable sources by 2030.
Thank you. Pass the mic one more down to Sir Christopher Chope.
This is a subject which is very dear to Boris Johnson's heart, and that's why he has promised that by 2050 the United Kingdom will have net zero emissions, and in so doing we will be the first major country in the world to achieve that important objective. And we've already been able to develop our offshore wind capacity in this country so that a very high proportion of the electricity generated is actually now coming from offshore wind. Looking at the issue more widely, we also need to ensure that we can adapt to the consequences of climate change, because as we saw in recent news reports last year, global CO2 emissions rose by 0.8%. So they rose as much as the total emissions which we generate in the United Kingdom, which shows that this is a problem that's a global one rather than just a national one.
Thank you. We'll bring it back down to Chris Rigby. Chris Rigby.
So, like I said, there is only one Green Party, there's only one party which is going to take this issue really seriously. Andy, it's really nice for you to say you're going to be rolling back the subsidies on fossil fuels, as the Labour conference was in part sponsored by BP. The Conservatives have banned onshore wind farms by making it more difficult to have planning permission for them. We would completely roll that back, and onshore is the cheapest form of energy which we can have. So we'll make it easier for planning. Offshore we are doing really well. We'll bring back subsidies for PV as well, and we are aiming to have 70% of the UK's electricity by wind in 2030, the rest made up by tidal and other renewable means. There'll be no nuclear within our policies either, like there are with other parties. We will be removing the subsidies. Oil and gas industries have massive subsidies at the minute, which totally eclipse whatever renewables are getting. So that will completely change.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a question for Andrew Dunn. You said that you were going to put a tax on fossil fuel companies because they have essentially ruined, in your view, the environment, and they continue to ruin the environment. How much would that raise and what would it be used for? You said your plan was fully costed. What will it be? What will that money do?
Well, I don't have the exact figures in front of me. As I say, there is a grey book with all our costings in it, and those figures will be included in that. But it's investment that we need to really make a difference and to tackle this climate crisis head on. There's no point pretending that we can do this on the cheap. There's no point pretending that it isn't going to cost a lot of money to transition our entire economy over to renewable energy and better ways of working. And I don't think we should be scared to spend that kind of money either, because if we don't do it, it's everybody who will feel the effects of it. And even as Sir Christopher said, it's not just us in this country, it's everybody across the entire world. and it's your future, and it will be your children's future who will absolutely suffer if we don't do something about it now.
Thank you. We'll go to Sir Christopher. Yes. So, Sir Christopher, you have consistently voted against measures to prevent climate change, and you voted for selling England's state-owned forest. You also put forward a bill to abolish the Department of Energy and Climate Change. Do you actually believe climate change is a threat?
I do believe it is a threat, but I also believe that the consequences of climate change are here, and that there's no point in us putting our heads in the sand and thinking that we can prevent climate change. That's why I want to put the emphasis on adapting to the consequences. You may have seen in the papers, I think within the last few days, an estimate that whatever happens in terms of global negotiations, that the sea levels are going to rise by up to 1 metre around our coast. Now, if that happens, we need to spend money on investment to prevent flooding and to improve those sea defences. And it is, I think, a misuse of resources to spend all our money on dealing with emissions rather than actually dealing with the need to adapt to this very real change.
Thank you. You have called climate change legislation a virtue signal. Do you stand by those comments?
Yes, I do, because in a sense that's a what has happened is that people have been spending a lot of money on these commitments without actually recognising that we as an individual country cannot do anything ourselves other than be a global leader. And another example some people will be familiar with is that in the last year alone, the amount of rainforest that was destroyed in Brazil was the equivalent of the whole land area of Devon and Dorset. So in the face of that destruction,
Thank you.
putting a few more trees in the ground is not going to make much difference.
Thank you. We do need to just shift the microphone down the line back to Mike Cox. Mike, you I think it's fair to say you didn't look very happy with what was being said there.
No, I thought it was appalling. You have at times been called a dinosaur, Sir Christopher, and in that respect, you are. You want to tackle the consequences of climate change, but you don't want to actually, tackle the causes of climate change. We've got to tackle the causes. Even if it may be a bit too late, I'm sure it will be a bit too late. We are terribly late at this, and we've got to start now, and we've got to start big.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to shift on the question. This is question number 5. Comes from Tamsin Covell. Yeah, question number 5 from Tamsin Covell. I don't know if you could hear me. Yes, do you want to sort of shout as loud as you can? So how do you intend to combat homelessness, obviously one major issue, and poverty? Chris Rigby.
Thanks. The rise that we've seen in homelessness and poverty over the last 10 years is absolutely outrageous, and it's happened purely because of policies which have been put in place. Food bank use has increased massively. I've seen that I think 1 in 50 households have had to use a food bank, which we can't have in the 5th richest country in the world. What we want to do as the Green Party is introduce something called universal basic income, which means regardless of employment status, regardless of age, everyone gets a minimum amount of money every week, which would be £78. That would completely replace the benefit system as it is now, which means everyone would start to have their basic needs met. It would mean that people wouldn't have to suffer, wouldn't have to be going to food banks, and will be able to afford to have somewhere warm and safe to call home and to be able to feed themselves.
Thank you. Pass that down there.
Homelessness is an absolute disgrace to our country and our society. There should be no need for people to be living on the streets. There should be no need for people not to have food on the tables at home and be able to feed themselves. If the Tory manifesto is implemented, child poverty is going to rise to a 60-year high. There are currently 4 million children who are homeless and 135,000 kids will be homeless this Christmas. It's an absolute disgrace. What Labour are going to do is we're going to end homelessness within the next 5 years. We're going to put funding immediately available on December 13th to make sure that no one has to sleep rough this Christmas at all. That will be a yearly fund of £100 million over the winter period. We're also going to put £600 million into funding hostels, and 4,000 homes will be built specifically for homeless people, and to make sure that they have the services that are available to them to not only get themselves off the street, but to then move on and tackle the issues that they may or may not have, and make better use of their life. I work with the food bank here in Christchurch as well.
I have to butt in there, but thank you very much. You'll pass down the line to Mike Cox.
Yeah, homelessness and poverty, it's an absolute tragedy that we're talking about this. We are the fifth largest economy in the world. And why on earth so many people are having to live on the streets is just appalling. And frankly, I'm ashamed to be part of the generation that's made that happen. In terms of tackling it, we're going to have to build new homes, social homes for people to live in. We're going to have to increase the minimum wage so that people can live. And actually, I have no idea whether this is in our manifesto or not, but I have a huge amount of sympathy for this universal income that people should have. I think there's an awful lot to be said for that. So, you know, that's the way I would go down it. And in terms of the homelessness, a lot of the people who are homeless suffer from mental health problems, and that is a key focus of our manifesto, where we need to spend an awful lot more money.
Well, one way of dealing with homelessness is to increase the number of homes, and that's why the Conservative Party is committed to a major house building programme. And I think it's nothing short of a scandal that in this conurbation, the BCEP conurbation, there are between 11,000 and 12,000 houses for which planning permission has been given for development, but which have not yet been developed. And that, I think, is something that should be being addressed by our local councillors. So far as poverty is concerned, the best route out of poverty is through employment. And that's why the Conservative government is so proud of the fact that we have got record rates of people in work and reduced rates of unemployment. And that means that there is less poverty as a result. And we changed the benefit system so that whereas before, as soon as you got a job, if you were unemployed, you then found yourselves without any money for the next 4 weeks while you were waiting to get your first paycheck. We changed that so that there is no longer that disincentive to actually get a job if you haven't got one already.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Well, we don't have time irritatingly to go into any further detail on that, but we do have time, thankfully, in the last sort of 5-6 minutes of this. We're going to start to briefly wrap it up, to have a few of your questions put directly to the candidates. But we can really only do this if you work with me. We only have one mic, and again, I really do apologise because this was meant to be your microphone. This was meant to be something you could interact with the politicians. Sadly, our sound system has not held up as well as we wanted it to. So my apologies. I think we promised a bit more interaction than you've been able to have. I want to come down here though. This could be embarrassing. It's on camera as well. I got 250 quid back from one over there on You Can Frame, but. Let's find someone who wants to ask a question. If you want to ask a question, put your hand up, make sure it is suitable. Remember you're on camera, I guess. Let's come down here. Yes, this is a high-risk manoeuvre, yes. Yes, your name, sir?
My name is Jack Collins. The question for Mr. Wrigley I have is, the £78 you're giving, what about those who are just going to use it to buy drugs?
There's a big assumption made about homeless people, but it's not a problem we can ignore. There is a lot of black market trade going on, and it is a problem with the homeless. So, your thoughts? I'm going to give you the mic.
Sure.
Oh.
Thank you. If we start to think that everyone's going to get money in their hand and they're immediately going to turn around and go and buy drugs, then you've got to sort of give it another thought. Interestingly, it does lead on to another Green Party policy which we have, which is the decriminalisation of all drugs and actually treating drug use as what it is, an addiction problem, not criminalising people for using drugs and actually going after the criminal gangs who bring drugs into the country and deal with them. We would also look at ways such as Portugal has done, where there are safe spaces to take drugs, where some drugs become legalised as well. And that has actually seen crime massively, massively fall in all the countries where that has happened.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll come down this side again. Once more, hands up if you wish to ask a question. Let's come down this side first. Freddie, I can see you.
For Andrew, what are the main sources of funding that you're going to use for all of your spending plans?
Chronic.
So, basically, we're going to tax the top 5% of earners. If you earn over £80,000, we're going to ask you to pay a little bit more. But an example of that is if you earn £82,000, we're going to ask you to pay just £8.30 more. That's less than you pay for a haircut, that's less than you pay for your Netflix subscription. We're also going to increase corporation tax to ask them to pay a little bit more to shoulder the burden. This doesn't take it as high as other EU countries, and so the argument that the Tories make that you'll see capital flight from the country is a complete non-starter because they can't go to France, they can't go to Germany and other places and have it any easier. We're also going to make sure that big businesses like Amazon that do massive, massive revenues all across the world are paying their taxes for the business that they do here. It's only right and proper that if you're making money here, you pay your taxes here. Just like we all do, big business should do as well.
Very much. We do not have time for any more, unfortunately. I know it's a big groaner. You see the end of the film and suddenly you want more. Of course, our thanks, as known from myself, known from everyone who's been involved, putting this on, from Will on the camera, James, Frankie, Marco, everyone who's helped me out, and the sound guys at the back, who have made a noble effort to set up actually quite a lot of technology. Obviously, sadly, that has departed early. Rest in peace, 5 microphones set up. It didn't quite work out as we wanted. But our biggest thanks goes to you, the audience, coming along, asking your questions, supporting, and of course to our candidates. A round of applause, please, for all of them.